Yo, what's shaking, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of the Orangebloods Texas Football Channel. I'm Geoff Ketchum. That's Anwar Richardson. Please, 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 James Brown said once upon a time, give us a like, subscribe to the channel, get notifications for when the videos come out. They're constantly coming out throughout the week, Monday through Sunday. Well, not usually on Sunday. We usually break for the Lord on Sunday. But for the most part, we have videos going up nonstop. Today, we're talking about the talent on the Texas football roster and whether or not the last three recruiting classes under Tom Herman have sufficiently allowed the Longhorns to have enough talent and depth to compete at an elite level, at an average-ish level, or if it's something way worse than that. We're breaking down the tiers, the positions, everything that you need to know about the scope of the Texas football roster as it relates to what Texas did in recruiting leading into the Steve Sarkisian era.
You know, to say that Sarkisian would have no, he's done no wrong, and it's all on these crappy players, I think it's a very lazy narrative to have. I think what we've always understood, and the thing that we've always said, and even my catchphrase has always been, how many 5 stars does it take to beat TCU, right? The thing has always been, there's enough talent here. You just need a coach to get the most out of the talent. And then that's all that it takes, because you look at the Oklahoma States of the world that don't have classes that are ranked higher than Texas. We look at the Baylors of the world. That's the exact same way. We look at a Baylor team, Ketch, that was 2-7 last season, Ketch, 2-7, and now only has 1 loss and is competing for a Big 12 title. We see these other teams that you would say don't recruit on the level that Texas recruits have success. And what we thought was supposed to happen, Ketch, with Sarkisian was he was going to be the person that comes in, takes what they have, fine-tunes it, makes the little changes that need to be made, makes better in-game decisions, and then all of a sudden, that's all you needed to have success. It was a literal form of the cake is baked, right? Because the cake was probably more baked, or at least it was more done or processed under Tom than it definitely was under Charlie, right?
Well, Texas finished 19th in the country last year in the final rankings. And the idea was you bring in a Steve Sarkisian, and that team that was 19th finishes better than that. Like, correct. However much better, whatever, right? But correct. Definitely finishes better. And so all throughout the offseason, Sarkisian talked about this is a team that could compete for a championship. They looked at it, they assessed it. Now it's funny because you remember Charlie in year 1 said, "Oh, we ain't gonna be winning no championships," and everyone got flipped out over that. Like no one liked it because it was a Brian Davis got him in year 1, and Charles like, no, national titles, stuff like, hey. Because Charlie looked, he's like, that ain't happening here. I can tell you that much. And he got ripped for it. And then Sarkisian, says, the opposite, that they're going to compete for that, and kept doing it. And Ketch, up until a couple of weeks ago, he was still talking about, hey, we're going to get back and play OU. The goal is to get to play OU in Arlington in the Big 12 championship game. So he still felt like that was a possibility, and he still felt like they still had a championship type roster. The question I want to ask you, though, Ketch, because let's talk rankings, because some will tell you that the Rivals rankings are basically doing a disservice, and that this program, that the talent on this team doesn't reflect accurately. The Rivals rankings does not accurately reflect the talent on the team. And even though there was 2 top 4 teams, and then there was another team. So I want you to, can you just speak to the rankings, the 2019 class, and what happened there? Like, I just want to sit back and let you do you. I want you to chime in when you're ready to chime in.
Mm-hmm.
Let's start with 2018, because it is the backbone of this entire team.
Okay.
And can I say, before I'm looking at the full list now, it's better than I thought. It's
Okay.
actually it's actually turned out to be pretty damn good class, like really good. Like whatever the problems with the football program are, I'm about to read off the 20. Forget about, I'll go in deep in a second. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to start from the bottom up.
Okay.
Cameron Dicker. I mean, you've got arguably the best punter kicker combination in the history of the school. That isn't my opinion. That's based on his actual production.
Yes.
Christian Jones, which so Christian Jones was the third worst prospect in the class. He's your starting left tackle. Moro Ajomo. So three of your four worst rated players were Moro Ajomo, Christian Jones, and Cameron Dicker.
What were the stars or the rankings on those guys, Ketch?
All were 3 stars.
3 stars. Okay.
Yeah. So although those guys are not elite players, Texas is getting more out of those players than their rankings would suggest. That's what, like I said, I'm only getting started. This class has some dudes in it. Okay.
Okay.
Joseph Osai was a low 4-star. He's gone, but he counts. Deshaun Jameson. He's no longer here, but Keontae Ingram's going to run for over 1,000 yards in the Pac-12 this year. Casey Thompson, Joshua Moore, Junior Angelau, Keandre Coburn, DeMarvion Overshown, Anthony Cook, and then Brennan Eagles is gone. Jalen Green is gone. BJ Foster is a starter, and then Caden Stearns is in the NFL. So all in all, I mean, that's double-digit significant contributors. And typically speaking, if you're getting double-digit starter level players out of a recruiting class, it's a good recruiting class. Okay. This particular recruiting class is probably going to end up with 5 or 6 NFL guys on it. And if you're getting 5 or 6 NFL guys in every recruiting class, that means you've got like 25 NFL guys on your roster at all times. That's how you compete for championships typically. Now, there are some holes in this recruiting class, but on the absolute outset, on this year's team, BJ Foster is a starter. I think he's going to go to an NFL training camp. Anthony Cook is going to be an NFL player based on this season, in my opinion. DeMarvion Overshown is going to be an NFL player, and he just was named a semifinalist for the Butkus Award. Shout out to Orangebloods athlete DeMarvion Overshown. Keandre Coburn, he's a starter. I don't know. At one point, he was viewed as a top 5 player on the team, but I'm going to put him on a finger for now. Junior Angelau, I think eventually he's going to play on Sundays. Don't know if he's the kind of guy but based on his play this season, I think he's been the best offensive lineman on the team. I think he gets a shot. Casey Thompson, the number 3 quarterback in the Big 12. Deshaun Jameson, that's 7. Maro Ajomo, no. We think Cameron Dicker, yes.
Yeah.
So that's like 8 dudes right there that are frontline starters, and I think have a chance to be Sunday players. And that does not include Caden Stearns and Joseph Osai.
Okay.
That's a good recruiting class. Like you'll notice we didn't really say any offensive linemen or pass rushers outside of Joseph Osai. But you've got a quarterback on there. We didn't include Keontae Ingram on the list of fingers I was counting. But I mean, there's another guy. He's going to end up on an NFL team when he leaves USC. This is going to end up being a class that when we look back in grade, they took 27 guys. More than half of the players on that commitment class ended up being pretty good players at worst. Now, when you look at the top of that specific recruiting class, they signed 5 elite prospects. 4 of them were defensive backs and 1 was a wide receiver. And that is going to be a theme of Tom Herman's recruiting. When we go through each of these classes, you're going to see a lot of big time DBs, some of which they've hit on, some of which they didn't hit on at all. And the strength of this program on paper from a recruiting standpoint is in the athletes. It's receiver and DB, which is ironic because receiver is not a strength of the team right now, really, outside of Xavier Worthy. Although I think the DB position is better individually than the sum of its parts have added up to this year. But when you look at the 5 highest rated players in that class, 3 of those DBs were Stearns, Foster, and Cook. And we can debate just how good, even Caden Stearns, who's literally starting as a rookie for the Broncos at safety, like we can argue about how good those players were, but Stearns, Foster, and Cook will have played and started in a lot of games in their career. And assuming Foster and Cook get drafted, which maybe that's not fair, I don't know that. But if they do, then they're going to fall into that category of when you're a 5-star player, your percentage of making an NFL roster is a certain amount. Like they're going to check that box. They're just not going to have proven to be elite, but you still have Overshown. You still have, there are still a number of guys in that class that I think are really good. If we go over the 2019, so I'm just saying right now, if every class produces like that class, you're in business. The problem is when you go to 2019 and you look at, let's say, all right, the 4 elite prospects in that class, again, DBs and receivers, right? So Brew McCoy, Jordan Whittington, Jake Smith, and Tyler Owens. Whittington's the only guy out of that 4 that they hit on, and 2 have transferred, and another guy may be on the verge of it. When you look at the 2009 class and you look at the 5 highest rated kids beyond the top 4, DeGabriel Floyd, Kenyatta Watson, Braden Liebrock, sensing a theme here. And then you've got Tyler Johnson, Chris Adamora, and Marcus Washington. So of the top 10 players in the class, you got a hit on Jordan Whittington, and you're 0 for 9 on the rest. So the 2019 class at this point is an absolute disaster. And then when you look beyond that, who are players out of that class that are contributing significantly right now? Tavondre Sweat and Roshan and Jared Wiley. So you've got some baby contributors, right?
Yes.
But nobody that last list of names I thought had some heavy hitters on it. Guys that we think are going to play on Sundays. When you look at the 2019 class, if Whittington can stay healthy, he's a Sunday player. Beyond that, comes down to how much you like Roshan Johnson and Tavondre Sweat, 2 guys that I actually think both will play on Sundays. But you know what? 3 in a class ain't good enough. And there's no offensive linemen, there's no pass rushers, and there are no defensive playmakers at all from this class. None. I mean, this is just a big old stinker class. The best defensive player on it is Tavondre Sweat, and that's it. That's all you have from this entire class on the defensive side of the ball right now in terms of meaningful contributors. You could say Adamora. You could say not many more. I'm trying.
It's tough. That one's tough.
When I just said you can say Adamora and had to stop myself, we have to realize that Adamora literally has been on the outside looking in for playing time all year long. And that's about as good as I can come up with. So that class is a disaster in ways that the class before it wasn't. Now, if we go to 2020, and again, we say how many elite of the elite prospects were there? 2, Bijan Robinson and Hudson Card. One of them is legitimately your best player. And the other guy, we've had that conversation about. But when you look at this class, again, when you talk about where the weaknesses were, this is a class that in its top 10 or 15 players, there are no pass rushers and there aren't a lot of offensive linemen. So so you've got Vernon Broughton hasn't made an impact yet. Xavier Alford hasn't, won't. Jake Majors is one of the highest rated players in that class. He's making an impact. And then you're looking at Jaron Thompson, Alfred Collins. And actually, Rivals did not have Alfred Collins ranked high enough. I would have Alfred Collins in the Bijan Robinson, Hudson Card category. And then you've got Andre Carrick, and that's pretty much it. So the 2018 class under Herman, I think, will be remembered as one of the best that Texas has had in the last 15 years. The 2019 class is a disaster. The 2020 class it's not a disaster, but it's a underwhelming, disappointing class in the making. And it was only ranked 14th in the country. Again, the number of elite level recruits from that class were minimal. You combine all of that together and you're left with a class that does really well at skill positions in DB on paper, but not offensive line, not pass rushers, not playmakers on defense. And that has been something that we've talked about throughout the offseason and all season long. The makeup of the roster kind of is what it is for me, which is good enough to be a top 25 team, 8-9 win team in the Big 12, nothing more than that. And, I think the recruiting classes reflect that. If all of the classes were as good as that 2018 class, Texas is ranked in the top 10 right now. The problem is when I go back to that 2018 class and I'm like Overshown and Deshaun Jameson and Joseph Osai and Caden Stearns and BJ Foster and Anthony Cook, and you start rattling off the players, there's only one class in the last 3 years that you can really do that with. Might be unfair in 2020 to put that level of expectation on that class because they're still so young, but the 2019 class is a big disappointment. And, it kind of is. So you add it all up and it's a bunch of hit and miss, quite frankly.
So then that goes back to, is there talent on his roster or not? And again, there's two layers of it, Ketch, right? There's going to be starters, right, where we see a lot of them are coming from the 2018 class, and there's going to be depth. And do you have, guys that you can go deep in the bench with? So then it goes back to, okay, now based off of what you're seeing from a ranking standpoint and rankings, assessing, was this a talented roster or not?
Well, yeah, it is.
Okay.
It's a roster that provided a 5-star level quarterback prospect and a guy a fourth-year junior in Casey Thompson, who, whatever adjectives we want to assign to Casey Thompson, he is the third-ranked quarterback in the conference. That's not a subjective opinion. Mm-hmm. That is a statistical fact. They have the best running back that the program has seen in 15 years since Jamal Charles was on campus. They've got multiple NFL running backs. I think that the wide receiver position is not good enough. And one of the weird things is Sark, it's not because they lack numbers. That position is full of 4-star prospects, and they just not have been developing. Now, look, so what that can mean a lot of things. The tight end room on paper is the best that the school's had in a long time. The offensive line is mediocre at best, and we thought that coming into the season. There wasn't a single guy on that offensive line that we thought was an all Big 12 player. The defensive line on paper is really good in the middle and lacks pass rushers, edge players. Linebacker position, you notice the only name I mentioned was DeMarvion Overshown. And technically, he wasn't recruited as a linebacker. And then the DB position and special teams on paper is in really good hands on paper. In special teams, you've got an all Big 12 level return guy in Jameson. and you've got an all Big 12 level punter and kicker. And in the secondary, while that group hasn't statistically been great, I think it's got 4 or 5 pros in it.
Mm-hmm.
So no, it's an uneven, but here's the thing. Who has depth? Texas did not lose to Baylor and Oklahoma. Baylor and Oklahoma State in the last 2 weeks because those teams had superior depth. Baylor wasn't like rotating in its second string offensive line. Mm-hmm. They played their starters, and 2 of those starters they went out and got in the offseason in a push to improve a mediocre unit, something Steve Sarkisian did not do. I think that I can't name a single back. I can't imagine that in Waco today, the conversation that they're having is that, what the difference was on Saturday? Our backups, which only played sparingly, difference in the game. I mean, nobody is saying that. It is something that I've seen on Orangebloods today. And it's like, well, if we look at Oklahoma probably has better depth in some areas than Texas. But if I look at Baylor and Oklahoma State and say, Anwar, name one single player that's a backup for any of those teams that you remember making a significant contribution in the wins. Can you? Because I saw Terrell Bernard making a shit ton of plays on Saturday. I did not see his backup making plays.
No. It's hard. It's definitely tough. I see your point, and I see where you're headed with it.
I mean, so this team doesn't have enough. Again, this team doesn't have enough talent to be top 10 good. But in the land of pretty good, where 8-4 gets you ranked, that's kind of where they've been the last couple of years in general. I mean, even with all due respect to the team that won the Sugar Bowl and finished 9th in the country, I think we generally just think of that as a pretty good team. It wasn't great. They ended up with the top 10 ranking, but I don't know that the quality was truly there. So this has just been a program that's been pretty good. The talent is in place for this team to be pretty good-ish. And they're mediocre. They're 5-5. They're average. Like, the talent is in place to be better than that. The talent on look, I reject the notion that this team doesn't have enough talent to win, but it has enough talent to lead 3 ranked teams in 3 consecutive weeks by double digits in the second half. Both things cannot be true at the same time. It can't be, well, they're good enough to constantly lead games 40, 45 minutes into the games by double digits, but God, not enough talent on the roster, period. I mean, that does not compute. But a nuanced conversation will tell you this program lacks quality offensive linemen. This program lacks pass rushers. This program does lack playmakers on defense. Those things keep you from being elite 12-0. When you've got Bijan Robinson as your running back and Xavier Worthy as your receiver, and you've got 4 NFL DBs and a Butkus semifinalist at linebacker and future pros on the defensive line, you should be better than 4-4. And this team through 45 minutes of the last 3 games screams better than 4-4. Being outscored 55-10 in the fourth quarter of the last 3 games feels like a whole bunch of problems adding up at once, and only talent is a piece of it.
Yeah, one of the last things I will say on it is, when we think about like talent and depleted roster, we think about, I think when we talk about what Charlie may have left and what Tom inherits, it's kind of like, there's a lack and you had to get better. Like, for instance, that quarterback room, right? The quarterback room that Tom had at one point, it was just, Shea Buechele, and they had a freshman and with Sam Ellinger. And it's like, So then what did they do? They went out and got talent, and went and tried to even you try to get Brandon Harris through the transfer portal. There was another guy that they tried to get. So he was like, we got to get quarterbacks. And that's what they went after. I think this, when you start saying there was a lack of talent on the offensive line, I think that's fair. I think you can easily say it. And we've been chronicling the issue.
For 8 years, Anwar.
Yeah. Yes. No, longer than that, because I've been here for 8. So
really, it goes back to 2006.
Okay, yeah, it's been a long time. I know you guys were writing these stories before I got here. So, so we've been
almost had hair back then.
I had no kids back then. And so, that in itself is fair. The tough part with that argument on, hey, there's no time in the offensive line. The tough part of that argument is, everyone else knew that. But you guys watched it, and I think a little bit of the, hey, we can coach these guys up because that other staff, and we can get the most out of these guys, and every staff does that. So this is not something that you would say just a Sarkisian or these guys. Every staff thinks I can get more out of the other staff, what the other staff did, and then they get in there and they start realizing, oh, this is why these guys didn't play, and
they chose poorly in the portal.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, they went after guys that they knew and guys that had SEC experience, even if it was terrible SEC experience.
Yeah.
And look, Mel Tucker, he's got Michigan State undefeated. They just beat Michigan. 20 guys through the portal. 5 of them were non-major power players. Like, they went out and found Darian Dunns of the world and trusted that they knew what they were doing from a scouting standpoint. You look at Baylor, part of what Aranda's been able to do is he used the portal. Went out and got that nose tackle from LSU. Went out and added a couple of offensive linemen to make that group better. Texas, and I think, look, it's not the biggest thing in the world, but Sarkisian misplayed the portal in his first year. And gambling on putting almost all of the attention on improving the linebacker position, it would have helped if they'd have gotten a good one. Just one. Just one. Like, Devin Richardson's not playing. Now, I like that pickup when it happened, but if the guy never plays, it's a miss. And just because I said I liked it when it happened doesn't mean that Sark doesn't have to own some responsibility for the miss. When we look at Ray Thornton, when we look at Ben Davis, those were 2 players that we said combined have played 10 years of college football, and they've never been good. It might have helped to look for some players that have been good.
Yeah, so you got all fair points. So, I think there's, the hard part is, to your point, Ketch, and I'll give him my final thoughts here. No one before the season was saying 8 games in, 4-4. That sounds about right. I think everyone said, no, there's talent here. And no one was saying Texas Bowl, or this team might be a life and death to be bowl eligible. Like, no one said that. Everyone believed, as they want to rewrite history, that there was enough talent here that Sarkisian would be able just to take the talent here to the next level. It hasn't happened. Doesn't mean it won't. Doesn't mean he can't. It just means it hasn't happened this season. It means the season is a disappointment, for sure. And look, this team is out of the Big 12 title hunt, and they were out of it at the end of October. And they got 4 games left. They got the entire month of November left, and no one can say that they expected that. And again, there's talent here to win. And again, but how much talent do you need? Again, because it's funny. People, I talked to someone on Orangebloods, and they started talking about, well, look at the talent they have in A&M and Bama and all these other programs. Like, we ain't talking about having more talent than those programs. We're just talking about Big 12 talent. You know me, Ketch. I always go back to that. I don't care. I'm not so focused on what Baylor has and these rankings. Just tell me you got more talent than these other people. Now, I do want to ask one question, though. I don't want to say anything else. Do you think, though, Rivals missed it when it came to judging talent in the 2019 class?
2019?
2019, do you think that there was a whiff there?
Amongst which level of players? I mean, look,
amongst their rankings, rankings of players. In hindsight, did they do a not a good enough job, or is it too early to make that call?
I mean, look, Brew McCoy has been absolute bust as a 5-star, so they were wrong on that. Jordan Whittington, I think they hit that one. Jake Smith is one of the more peculiar players I've ever seen, but you'd have to say that they missed on that one. But how much of that is injury related?
Of course, he was a parade All-American as well.
It was, obviously. And look, Rivals isn't alone on any of this.
He was a Gatorade Player of the Year.
Yeah. Tyler Owens was a major miss. And that includes me. I fell in love with everything about that dude, except apparently his ability to play football. When for the Texas commitments, once you get beyond those 4 guys, and you fall into a territory where beyond those guys, everybody else on the roster they signed has a 75% chance or greater chance of not panning out. So that class was ranked 14th. No, that class was ranked 4th. This is where I would say Rivals not just made a mistake in the 2019 class, but where Rivals makes mistakes in general. It's too much value put on the 4-star prospect. So, if I cut the line at Tyler Owens, because they signed 4 elite prospects, but they signed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. They signed 12 more 4-stars. So on paper, that looks same thing with this class. This class is 4-star heavy. It jacks your ranking up. But all a 4-star means is that generally speaking, you got about a 25% chance of being really good. The 5-star guys on a different level, and the high 4-star guys there should be a 6-star and a 5-star. And those should make up the weight of the elite in rankings. What Rivals didn't miss on players. Rivals misses on a structure that treats a guy like Javon Shepard on the same level or not too far away from it as a guy like Jordan Whittington. And those two things aren't the same. Or, to use an athlete for athlete example, Marcus Washington ranked as a 5.9, Jordan Whittington ranked as a 6.0. Do those two players with our eyeballs tell us that there's a 0.1 difference? There's just one little small step difference between those two guys, not even remotely close. So my issue with Rivals, and I've said this for a long, long time, I feel like Penn and Teller, when we hype up guys in recruiting, it's a shell game. And it's like, huge commitment. Well, how huge was it? Because he's got an 80% chance statistically of failing. So how huge was it really? And I think people hear 4-stars and they think, oh man, we're loaded with talent. These are, let me just real quick, I'll end it with this.
Okay.
These are, again, the 4-star non-elite prospects that Texas signed. Are you ready?
Okay.
DeGabriel Floyd, Kenyatta Watson, Braden Liebrock, Tyler Johnson, Chris Adamora, Marcus Washington, Javon Shepard, Darian Brown, David Benda, Myron Warren, Jacoby Jones, Isaiah Hookfin.
That's rough.
That's rough, but hey, it's a bunch of 4-stars, Anwar.
That Jason said was a huge commitment at the time, by the way. I'm just going to always like
it's
to
not,
get
Jason's program to think like that.
Yeah.
What I'm suggesting is revolutionary. What recruiting services don't want to admit that the number 150 player in the country is basically worthless. They can't make money that way. I am a beacon of truth when it comes to what accurate value of rankings actually exist. But boy, you find yourself in a world of skepticism and pain when you buy into it, because it really requires your coaching staff to do a good job of development. If you recruit like Kirby Smart in Georgia, you don't have to be elite developers of talent, because that talent, Xavier Worthy hasn't been developed this year. Xavier Worthy showed up developed. Bijan Robinson isn't succeeding because Stan Drayton is showing him the light. Bijan Robinson is a bad MFer, and he does BAMF things because that's who he is. Texas just doesn't have enough of those guys at all positions on the field to be able to compete with the elite of the elite of the elite. And what it means is, of that 12 guys that I just mentioned, you've got to be, the national average is that 3 of them turn into NFL drafted players. Of the 12 that I mentioned, did I say anybody's name that looks like an NFL draft pick in waiting?
I don't know. Did you mention a starter?
Marcus Washington.
Yeah. It was not I mean, he's getting that nod because of Jordan being hurt, right? So,
and Jacoby Jones, I suppose.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, so those are 2 guys who started / contributing, but yeah, me, you definitely haven't named a standout for sure.
The national average on that says that Texas should be getting 3 NFL drafted players out of that group. And if you're developing, that's the national average. If you're developing at a high level, you get 4 or you get 5. Oh my God, you get 5. And again, now you stack that on another class where the results are similar. And now you've signed 24 4-stars, basic 4-stars, but 10 of them are or 8. Like, you've got to hit, we're talking about really fine margins. At a minimum, Texas needs to be hitting 3 or 4 guys from that group I mentioned. At a minimum. And they're hitting really 0.
Yeah.
And that's how recruiting classes bust out. And look, some of that is DeGabriel Floyd hurt. Kenyatta Watson hurt. Braden Liebrock has been hurt a lot. Darian Brown never, a third of those guys either never really got a chance to play or have barely played. That's part of it. And when you lose guys to injury, your development of the other guys there has to be really good. And the problem for both Tom Herman and Steve Sarkisian up until now is the development of those types of players has not been above average. It's been, in this particular recruiting class alone, below average. Now we go back to the other class, 2018, it's the exact opposite, right? Real quick, just to finish this exercise. This would be the number. So they signed non-elite level 4, just to let me finish this to prove my point. In the 2018 class, Texas signed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 4-stars. Okay. Mm-hmm. Now let me count the names among that group. Overshone, Coburn, Angelau, Casey Thompson, Deshaun Jameson, Joseph Osai. That's 6. That does not include Keontae Ingram, which would make 7 of guys who are just like legitimately pretty good players. They're going to play on Sunday. That is a better than 50% clip of the exact same type of players. So, boy, that 2018 class is good, Anwar. It really is. Mm-hmm. The 2019 class is a big old bag of vomit. And
in 2020, you would characterize as what?
Well, if we look, Same category of prospects, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There's about 11 guys that they recruited. Hudson Card, Vernon Broughton, Xavier Alford, Jake Majors. So there's one. Jaquindon Jackson, Keaton Crawford, Prince Dorba, Jaron Thompson. I'll put him in there.
He's playing, starting.
Troy O'Meary, Alfred Collins. So there's 3. Kind of shaky, but from that group, there's 3 right now. That's kind of average. Texas really needs that to go up a level, because if it's not, again, we're talking about the guts of your recruiting class not developing at average levels.
Fair.
So, and honestly, you add it all up, 18, 19, and 20, Texas is average. Slightly above but look, above average or average developing 4-star talent. Baylor doesn't get that. TCU, Iowa State, they don't get that. Those programs don't have 10 4-stars in their programs at all. So there are rich man problems in recruiting to a certain extent. And when I say you've got to hit on 3 or 4 of those guys, the Baylors of the world have to do that with recruiting talent not as good. Remember when Charlie showed up at Louisville and he was taking 3-star guys and developing them at 4-star levels, 4-star guys at 5-star levels? That's what great development looks like. I have no idea why he could do it at Louisville and he couldn't do it at Texas, but those are the margins that have to be hit. And Texas, in some ways, is hitting them, in other ways coming woefully short. Again, you add it all up together and it's not good enough, but it's also not terrible.
But overall, you still feel like there's talent on the roster. The overall roster.
Yes. I mean, but again, but talent to do what?
Talent to be better than 4-4 at this moment.
Without even hesitating.
Right.
Talent to be champions? No. Which is why neither one of us bought into the idea that they were remotely good enough to compete and win a championship this year. That idea never came into our mind. We never said that. But yeah, the talent to be better than 500? Absolutely.
Fair enough.
Thanks for watching the show. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, get the notifications, do all of that stuff. For Anwar and myself, we'll talk to you tomorrow, as a matter of fact. You guys be good to each other. Later.